Good day to you. This is Anagalactic on a Saturday, the 25th day of October 2025 from Chico, California. Today we'll be talking about geometry. If for any reason you feel lacking in your education in mathematics, you certainly would want geometry instead of mathematics. Strictly speaking, you don't need mathematics. What you need is geometry. And the reason is that everything in mathematics must be translated to geometry or it's worthless, unless you're doing something with money. All right, or some other game. But when you're dealing with the universe, you've got to get strict with yourself and start addressing reality the way reality tells you to address her. Okay? So you need geometry. Your mathematicians disagree. Well, I'm here to make sure that someone disagrees with the mathematicians because they're in a cul-de-sac across the board, and they always have been. Mathematics has been hailed as one of the greatest inventions of mankind, so much so that even atheists begin to believe in God because they just can't believe that numbers could have invented themselves, or even worse, that man's mind invented numbers. But about 99% of all mathematicians believe that math is God and there is no other. That's a modern phenomenon. So what we actually need today for you and me, because we do want to do science, but our scientists can no longer help us. That is to cross the boundary into undiscovered space so we can get the answers to the questions that we want. Mathematics has failed, and it was destined to fail. Euclid could not have foreseen that, but I could name several men who should have seen what was happening while it did happen. And probably the worst offender of all is Albert Einstein, because he was so incredibly stupid. I really respect Einstein, so I hope that you forgive me to the extent that you may respect Einstein as much as I do, which is impossible. I respect Einstein more than any other man who's ever lived, certainly since the time of Einstein. But he was hideously stupid. He was blind, and he led mathematics astray. But I'll be honest with you, that's not how I evaluate Albert. Because no man before or since Einstein saw the mistakes that were made by Euclid, which nobody for 2,500 years was ever able to correct. And now we're going to study the correct way to approach the universe geometrically. I have already proved over the past 4 years that this geometry that I discovered, which nobody else was able to see right in front of their faces, answers all the questions in physics, solves all the problems that have been accumulating in mathematics, and gives us a philosophical insight into consciousness and reality that simply cannot be surpassed. And now, this is the dawning of a new age of science. And I must emphasize at the outset that we always knew all of the things that I'm about to tell you were already right in front of our eyes. And some extremely negative word would have to be applied against my forerunners, who simply were not as smart as I am. They weren't as clever. They weren't as serious. They were either stupid, or they were self-blinded, or perhaps, and this is becoming increasingly provably true, they're morally corrupt. Intelligence is associated with wisdom. I've been seeking wisdom all my life, but I never suspected that I would be led into pure science, and I have discovered the purest science of all time. This is a new level of geometry. This is also a new level of mathematics, which is going to make your teachers look like chimpanzees, and they're not going to like that. So this is unacceptable information, and you must be forewarned. To the degree that you're capable of understanding what I say over the next 40 minutes, you will be in extraordinary danger, because no one will ever understand you again. So if that's something you're willing to trade for pure wisdom and the answers to all the questions you've ever had in any category, moral, religious, ethical, world politics, just basic math, what are numbers, what's the universe, what's a galaxy, what's infinity, what's imaginary space, what does everything mean that means anything at all? I have it. I have all the answers. The solution to the quantum paradox, the collapse of the wave function, I have broadcast so many times over the past 4 years that if you haven't caught any of those videos, they're still public. I have just under 400 of my 1,200 videos, approximately 40 to 60 minutes each. That's an enormous amount of work. An incredible amount of work. Now, if I were to rate myself against some of my heroes, I've done nothing comparatively. So everyone has to evaluate themselves where they stand in the food chain. Where are you in the hierarchy? Are you getting close to being a know-it-all? You'll never catch up with me. And if that makes you angry, good. Good. But if it doesn't, much better. Because I'm the man who can answer any question now. I discovered the quantum of gravity. I discovered quantum gravity. I'm going to bury the standard model experts in 3 major categories. The standard model of geology, the standard model of biology, the standard model of the universe, and there's a 4th. And that's the one I'm going to reveal to you today. The standard model of mathematics is now dead. I killed it. So there's no more linear algebra. And that's what you're going to learn today, just so you know what you're in for. And if you don't like that, you can go right back to who you were 7 minutes ago. Okay? So I'm not doing this to get anything out of you. So you have no right to criticize me, but I guarantee you, if you don't, those who come after you will. I want you to share this information because I'm not trying to make money. And I'm also trying not to become famous. I like to live alone, but I'm under orders from a much higher power than you'll ever understand. So listen carefully as I give you some terms that are going to shake you up, okay? Do you know how to add? Are you sure? Are you sure that you know how to add? Okay. I'll bet you do. You know why? Because animals can add. Chimpanzees can add. Anybody can add. Because it's just sequential. All you have to do is have symbols for numbers that succeed each other. When you get up to 10, you switch to a 2-digit component form. When you get up to 100, you switch to 3 digits. Those are called, well, I think you know what they're called. So we're not going to deal with numbers today. Not in any way. You're not going to hear any numbers, except as we use numbers indicatively. For instance, have you ever heard of 2D? Well, I'll bet you've heard of 3D, but I would bet any amount of money that you cannot accurately define what 3D actually means, so that it would pass my test, because only I can define that absolutely accurately. Albert Einstein could not. And neither has anyone since Einstein been able to define what 3D space is. And yet, strangely enough, it's still in use as the one and only geometry that's ever been used. I could add in 2,500 years, but that's redundant. That's the whole time that mathematics and geometry have been around. Mathematics is much more recent overall than geometry. Geometry goes back to the beginning of human history. So the first person who ever did science did geometry. There's no question about that. So what you're going to be learning is what the ape men never could learn, what the Greek men never could learn, and nobody all the way up to the present day Western civilization, led by the United States, absolutely brain dead, absolutely now against humanity, because they're so stupid. There is an intrinsic number system that nobody has ever discovered, let alone even tried to use. And it's based on the simplest geometry in the universe, which I discovered. And that's a fact. I discovered the circle. I have to be more specific, though. I discovered the circularization of the plane. Not even radar engineers know what that is. Not even the masters of polar coordinates know what that is, even though they're staring right at it. Have you ever made an XY grid? Draw an X line and then a Y line? I want you to listen carefully. If you take notes, that's a good idea, but you'll want to listen to this video at least 5 times, and very quickly you'll see why. And now I'm not going to interrupt. We're going to go through this straight. This is called an Allen-McDonald proof, except it's translated to geometry, leaving Allen behind. One of my teachers. I'm leaving all my teachers behind, including Roger Boschkovich, Albert Einstein, and there's quite a few others. No man reaches the edge of physics or mathematics or science in any way without standing on what? The shoulders? Wrong. That's incorrect. Whoever said that, and I believe it was Albert, he meant well. It's just a little pithyism. But you don't stand on anybody's shoulders. That would make that man more important than you, because he's holding you up. That's never happened. That has never happened. What you're standing on is not the shoulders of giants. You're standing on a database. So we're going to go back to the beginning when Euclid led us all into the wrong path. It's no surprise that Euclid, who lived in the Bronze Age, okay? He's practically Paleolithic. And Euclid is so primitive and so unknowledgeable and so undiscerning that words cannot describe it, except you see he's off the hook. You know why? Because nobody before him figured out what he figured out. And he is not accredited with geometry so much. Throughout the ages, throughout the past 2,000 years, Euclid is not as famous for his geometry, which is incorrect, by the way. Linear geometry has been destroyed. I destroyed it. Well, actually, the universe destroyed it. I simply discovered what the universe says about Euclid, and the universe's verdict is final. But Euclid is not to blame. The way we cast blame in science, you can't cast blame on someone who's trying their hardest and did their best, such as Darwin, whom I think is one of the greatest scientists who's ever lived. Darwin, whose theory, not his theory, but the way his theory was developed, was satanic. Well, the same thing is true of linear algebra. Let me ask you something. Do you enjoy calculus? You certainly don't. You probably don't even understand it. Most of the men who make their living using calculus have no idea what they're doing. There are no masters of calculus, unless it's Newton or Leibniz. After that, everyone else is just a copycat. They're guilty. Whoever uses the calculus is using it to make money for the government. And you can check that as deeply or as widely as you want. You will never find an exception to what I just said. Calculus has been inherited by the world government to do what it does. And calculus got us to the moon. Calculus got us cars. Calculus got us the Industrial Revolution. Calculus got you lighting. It got you every form of science that you call technology is calculus. And it's only calculus. So why do I say that calculus is such a curse? Have you ever read a calculus book all the way through? No, you haven't. No man ever has. You can't. I'm talking about a university-level calculus book. A standard textbook in calculus is impossible to read, and nobody ever has. You might get 1/2 of one page. I've read dozens of calculus books. I've never gotten beyond page 10. I've tried for 5 decades to master the calculus. It was only 7 years ago that I finally got one of the greatest insights that it is possible for a solitary man to achieve. I have no connections. I am not affiliated with any industry, any institution, no university, no sponsors, no peers, no peer review. You're free to turn this off anytime you want. So here we go. The evolute of asymptosis. The evolute means a bud. And if you want to know how to interpret the word evolute, watch a photon come away from an electron. An electron is a sphere, and a photon is part of that sphere that detaches. How does it do that? By an evolute. That's what evolute means. It's a transform. Okay. If you don't know these terms, don't worry, it's going to get much, much worse. This will be the most complex, challenging lecture you will ever hear until my next one, and the thousands after that if I have time. Eventually I'll be live, probably at Madison Square Gardens, Albert Hall, somewhere in Moscow, somewhere in Europe, perhaps on the East Coast at Yale, Harvard, Princeton, or one of the other shit-ass Ivy League colleges. Don't count on it. But that's what should be happening right now. I should be lecturing for money. And I will demand money not because I want it, but because otherwise I won't be taken seriously. You're going to pay money. This is going to be one of the last free series that I ever give. After that, you're going to pay to hear me. The evolute of asymptosis. Asymptosis is very easy, so don't get confused. 1/x. Have you ever seen that graph? It goes like this and comes down into the graph and then proceeds away. But it never hits 2 axes. It never hits a certain x-axis. So what's the relationship of that curve to the axis? It's asymptotic. On Zeno's paradox. It will never touch it, but it's not parallel with it. That's called an asymptote. The transform to integral space. What is integral space? It's what I discovered. And I call it integral space because, as I said, I discovered what Newton missed, what Leibniz missed, even what Boschkovich, my teacher, missed. And everybody since has missed what the calculus actually is. It has to do with the infinitesimal and the integral. So when I say the transform to integral space, a transform is a function, which means it's mathematical, but it's also geometric. And if you don't know that, take it from me. They're exactly the same. And if your mathematics doesn't have a geometry, you're in modern physics. And that's why their mathematics is shit. It's because it's not real, and it doesn't represent real quantities. Einstein was the last one to have a major insight. After that, it's dog shit. And if you don't believe that, there's the off button, you peanut. All right, so the transform, the functional change to integral space. From what? Derivative space. What's that? It's what your stupid physicists are using because they're using linear algebra. Linear means derivative. I proved that in 2022, so pay attention because there's no one else on the face of the earth who got this right except me. All right? So the transform, that is the functional mathematical transformation from derivative space, which is linear space, to integral space, which is what? Depends on if it's the circle or sphere. The circle is the perfect closed object on the plane. The sphere is the perfect closed object in volume space. And there's something after that. There's a circle. The circle is part of the sphere. As the circle is to the sphere is to the hyperspheric universe, which is finite. And I discovered that. Either one of the two discoveries I just named for you earns me a Nobel Prize whether I'm given it or not. I've earned at least 20 Nobel Prizes. You think that's grandiose? There's the off button, suck butt. I don't need you. You're lucky to be listening to me, and if you don't like that attitude, fuck you. Thank you. I don't want you to listen to this, because I know you won't understand it. But I'm going to try my damnedest to make you understand it, because I'm getting ready to die. Okay? So that's how it is. Sorry for my attitude, but when you see your death on the near horizon, you might be tempted to get out what you know as well. Except you don't have anything worth sharing. I do. I have hundreds of unknown facts that change science. This was supposed to be a religious channel. I'm supposed to be talking about how Islam takes the place of Christianity. But if you think the Prophet Muhammad takes the place of Jesus Christ, I just read the words of Muhammad himself, where he says the opposite. So Muhammad is okay. That's in a book that you've never heard of, called the Quran. And if I'm talking to anybody from Asia, I apologize, because you know far more about that holy book than I do. But I'm catching up. The Prophet Muhammad is a prophet. But as for putting him in the same class as Yeshua, he didn't. Why should you or me put Muhammad in the same class as Yeshua? But I'll tell you something, the way Islam developed, we got more than just Euclid and Einstein to start throwing mud balls at. We need to start throwing mud balls at anybody who preaches incomplete truth. And I'm afraid that Islam falls into that category now. And that distresses me, because I'm Islam and I'm now an imam. And if anybody disagrees with that, you better keep listening, because your soul may be at stake, not just your mind. All right, so the transform to integral space occurs where Euclid began, at the plane. Euclid's Elements does not explicitly begin with the plane. Instead, he begins axiomatically, somewhat innovatively, with the point and the line. I have given so many lectures on this that they can't be counted anymore. And I don't have an index to those, so I'm not blaming you for not catching up. I'm apologizing for not going into detail. If you're not extremely intelligent and extremely devoted to truth, you may not want to listen to this, because 9 out of 10 Americans, this would kill them if they were forced to learn what I say. All right, so you've been warned, but if you're listening, blessed art thou. All right? Instead, he begins axiomatically, somewhat innovatively, with the point and the line. This sequence may now be characterized dimensionally. Okay? 0, 1, 2. Those are dimensions. There's also 3. You've heard 3D. That's what the D stands for. 3 dimensions. There's also a 4th dimension that you may have heard of. Space-time. So that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 linear spaces. The 4th one is called space-time. 3D is called physical space. 2D is called the Cartesian plane, and always say Cartesian or you're wrong. And I'm the only man who knows that. It's the Cartesian plane. But much better than naming it after René Descartes, which is always a mistake. To name something that important after a man is one of the greatest flaws in science. Just like the Pythagorean theorem. You know what that is. You know what its real name is? No. Because you were trained to think incorrectly. There's no such thing as Pythagorean theorem or the Pythagorean theorem. You know what it's really called? If you had a brain in your head, really, if you were taught by men who knew what they were doing, you would call that by its right name. And you never would have heard of Pythagoras. That man has absolutely no value in history. Pythagoras is a meaningless jumble of letters. It's called the right angle law, R-A-L. R-A-L, right angle law. Think of RAF, Royal Air Force of the Brits, and just change the F to an L. Right angle law. All right? It's not a theorem, and it's not by Pythagoras. Okay? Leave comments if you want me to explain anything. Now's the time to ask questions. You won't get much longer to ask me more questions, okay? This sequence may now be characterized 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Of what? Linear dimensions. 0? That's how Euclid began in his very first sentence in the most famous book ever written by the human hand. The very first sentence is the point, is non-existent. Euclid said that. It's the first thing that Euclid said, and everybody believes it. The point does not exist. Okay? You got that? Don't forget, I'm never wrong. I'm not wrong. You will never trip me up. 0 is not the number 0 here, but simply the mathematic index. I hope you know that term. I know you don't, unless you've heard my prior videos. Leave a question if you need to know what index is. 0 is not 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 like it's an actual number. It's simply symbolic. It really means the first. But since it's referring to the number of dimensions, it's 0. No dimensions. That means it's not there. What an interesting way. No wonder we have the quantum paradox and an expanding universe. Both of those insane problems come from an inability to define what is a number and an inability to use geometry, and it's the second problem that's by far the worst. All of your scientists are guilty. All of the professors of mathematics, especially at Berkeley, and you know who I'm talking to there, Berkeley professor of mathematics who's written a book I like. I'm talking to you, Charlie, from Russia with Love. Yeah. Love and math, huh? I'm going to give you hate and math if you don't listen to me, immigrant. You understand what's happening here? You either are on my side or you go back where you came from. Love and math. I love this guy. But I have to kick in some doors. And he might wake up. Tell him! Go to Berkeley and tell that Russian, whom I love. All right. 0 is not the number 0 here. It's simply the mathematical index of dimensionality. If that doesn't make sense, turn this off and go play with your poodle. The fact that it is the 0th dimension is the first sentence in Elements. Euclid said with his own mouth in Greek, when Euclid was alive, he said this: the point does not exist. Does that make sense to you? It had better not. So Euclid was an ape. Humanity had not yet evolved. Euclid was the last of the Cro-Magnons. But then there was Australopithecus and Homo erectus. And you know who the last ape was? Albert Einstein. Oh no, but then there were some more. You know who the last ape was? Richard Feynman. Oppenheimer. Fermi. Dirac? No, he's more in my class. Dirac was trying to evolve with all of his might. Well, so was Einstein. I'm the only man who actually succeeded in evolving. Isn't that something? I just think that's just incredible. What you think of that doesn't make any difference unless you tell people to listen to me, because I'm a genius and now science has to listen to me, because I'm right and everybody else is wrong. That's what I told you, and then we're going to go back to Islam, because I'm not going to fuck around with this goddamn science business much longer. You don't care about getting the unified field solution, which I got. You don't really care about quantum gravity, which I got. You don't care about the collapse of the wave function, entanglement, or superposition. God, I could use a nasty word, but it depends on where you are. I'm much crueler towards Americans, because you have the least excuse of anybody in the world or in history. And I've given, So I'm just going to contain myself so I can do my job without worrying how stupid you are. And I may be talking over your shoulder. If you're listening to me like, hey man, I actually appreciate you, go on. After you will come thousands that want me dead. By then, I probably will be dead. But this is inevitable. And I'm going to fight. Whether I'm dead or not. All right? I'm like a Plains Indian. Little big man, he had his head chopped off, but then the enemy was afraid because his head kept going, hey, 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 and his head continued to fight. Euclid had no negative numbers. I just want to throw that out there. There's no such thing as negative numbers in Euclid's day. They had no conception of negativity. There were no negative numbers. What about zero? Absolutely not. Nobody had even dreamt of a number called zero. But then look at Euclid. He dreamt of a point that has 0 dimensions. And I just got done telling you that geometry is the basis of mathematics. So let me ask you a quiz question so we can go on. Who discovered 0? Was it someone in India centuries after Euclid, or was it Euclid? It was Euclid. But then nobody discovered what Euclid had actually discovered. The same thing happened with Max Planck. The same thing happened with Bošković. Well, who came after Bošković to explain what Bošković had discovered? I did. Who came after Max Planck to explain what Max Planck discovered? I did. Okay? I could go on with the, but let's just make this brief. So, what makes the line? According to Euclid, points. That's why he began with a point. You know why he began with a point which doesn't even exist? Because the line is made of points. Nobody argues with that, so don't try to pull a fast one here. Save your breath for when you really want to get me. That's coming up soon. Neither points nor lines have any dimension, except the line does, doesn't it? It has 1 dimension. It took a very, very, very long time to discover that fact. This shows you how stupid is the human mind. The human mind is not miraculous. Not in practice, it's not. The human mind is just a little bit above mineral level, except for my mind. All right? This is going all the way, so keep your fat mouth shut unless you want to leave a comment and I'll answer you. This is just rhetoric because you can't talk back to someone who's making a video in private. So I'm just being funny. I know. I'm hilarious. So Euclid had no negative numbers. They hadn't been invented yet, nor would zero be discovered for centuries. So how did he come up with 0 dimensions? He didn't give it a number. He just said it's the absence of any dimension, and then he named all 3 in volume space. Length, height, and the third one, which has no name. It goes up and down, that's 1 dimension. It goes left and right, or east and west if you prefer, and that's it. There aren't any more dimensions. Oh! I almost forgot! There's an invisible one, and that makes depth. And you can't see that line. If you draw that X, it's actually a plus sign, and you look for the third dimension, you can't see it because you're looking down the barrel of something that doesn't exist. And a line cannot exist. You know why? It's made of non-existent objects. So why do we imagine there's such a thing as a line? Very good question, which only I can answer. And I just gave you a tremendous insight into geometry. You can't see the third dimension. You never have and you never will. I'm going to show you how to see the 4th and 5th and 6th dimension. But it won't be in linear space. That's the killer. Euclid was a monkey, okay? He wasn't even a scientist. He certainly didn't discover anything good. He was an idiot, all right? He just knew how to put blocks together. I'm exaggerating, but not by much. It's his descendants that fucked the pooch. Euclid was compelled to use non-mathematic language to describe the point. The fact that it had no dimension, and still doesn't, or better yet dimensionality, did not deter him from describing precisely the dimensionality proposed. How many dimensions are there? Do you know? Is it 3 or 4? Incorrect. How many dimensions are there? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Incorrect. How many dimensions are there? There are none. I'll show you what a real dimension is. I discovered what a dimension is. You have never heard of it, and neither have your teachers, and neither have your physicists, and no mathematician will ever credit what I say. But anybody who calls me a crackpot is going to get cracked right in the pot. The only way you can do so in science, you disprove the motherfucker. That's already been done. I'm writing my paper now. It'll be done before Christmas this time because I don't have any more time. Today we ironically term Euclid's method a jump. It's called a jump. Today we call it a quantum jump. That's so naive. Only I know what a quantum jump is. I'll be teaching that to you. What is a quantum jump? If you don't know that, you don't know anything. And only I can teach that to you, or to your professors, or to any PhD, or to Sir Roger Penrose himself. Another one of my beloved teachers. I'm so far beyond my teachers now. Nobody is ahead of me. I am the greatest scientist of the modern age. Probably of all time. Right? Cast your vote. Not to me. I don't give a fuck what you think. I'm telling you what to think, Charlie. And that's the way it is in science. You don't talk back to the universe. If you don't speak for the universe, which you certainly don't, then somebody who does speak for the universe has precedence. I'm an imam. I'm a prophet. I'm so far beyond PhD and Nobel Prize, you don't have a word for my level of genius. I'm a gift to science. And I'm almost gone. I have tried for 4 years to be heard. In a civilized country, I would have been heard within the first year. I'm in America. Actually, I'm in the land that Satan owns your ass. Well, he doesn't own my ass, and that's the only difference between us. Besides everything else I just said about intelligence. Let's look for comparison between what Euclid did to make the point, what he did to make the line. Did he go on to the plane? Yes, he did, but not systematically. Did he get to volume space? Yes, about half of his book is about volume figures. But he did it incorrectly. He was an idiot. He didn't know math at all. He did not use math. That's the only reason he got so much right. He didn't use numbers. I'll teach you to avoid numbers too. And then I'll show you why numbers, you have to use them. Numbers, but you have to use the correct number system. Nobody has ever figured that out. What is the correct number system? What you and I were taught in the first, second, and third grade is sheer shit. And everything after that just built up on the lies. So this Satan business goes motherfucking deep. All right? Good. That's enough for now. That's 40 minutes. That is the absolute limit attention span for an American. I have no respect for science any longer. If you want science, you're going to have to listen to me now, or you're simply gone. You're worthless. Only I'm valuable now. Got that? Thanks so much. I'm sure I convinced thousands of people. I'll be back later. I have to recharge this phone. I have no money. I'm dying because I have no medicine. The power is turned off in my house. And I should be on circuit talking at universities, talking to high school kids, talking in foreign countries. I'm a trained diplomat. What the fuck is going on with the United States? Thank you.